Right. Let's talk about season 1, episode 6 of Pluribus HDP. Now, instead of doing what I was doing before, which was to live react to the episode and have the video be all choppy and not being able to really give my full thoughts because I just watched the episode and didn't really have any thoughts to give, I thought I'd rather watch the episode first, load it up in DaVinci, and look at the notes I took while I was watching the episode and kind of go through it with you, gushing about what I liked, discussing some theories and some things that I feel might be connected to Blood Song of Waikaro. So on the left side of the screen, you can see the various sections that we're going to go through here today. First up is this opening scene. Now, while I was watching it, I wrote down here, Ray portrays adrenaline so well. Not a lot of talking, only noises. Now, if you've ever been in a situation that has been extremely terrifying to you or extremely adrenaline inducing, you'll know that the part of the brain that controls speech, complex language, becomes an afterthought. It's, whatever processing power that your brain usually gives it is diminished in favor of diverting energy to whatever parts of the brain work better when you are in a life or death situation. I talked about this a long time ago, when I made a video reviewing House of the Dragon, where I talked about how Helena, in one of the scenes, portrayed that terror, that adrenaline feeling so well. There was no talking as she ran through the castle. She ran to her mother's room without talking, just sort of making these frightened noises. It's these little things that really add up. In the first episode, a lot of people were praising just how natural and human Carol and Helen's relationship felt. They felt like they talked like real people. They acted like real people. And this is where it comes from. It is in that deep understanding of human behavior, human nature, how people react and respond to certain things. That is how we get these very delicious, very realistic moments. So Carol enters her very investigative detective mode here. We've seen it in previous episodes. She's a go-getter, and I'll talk about it more as we get to Manousos, who I believe is her personality counterpart, whereas Diabate is her personality opposite. But for where we are right now in my notes, I put that she's truly investigative with the camera. She is not a passive individual. She's a very self-deprecating individual, but she's not passive. She's taking a lot of initiative to figure out what is going on, and not only to figure it out for herself, but she wants to share it with the others. We'll see later on that the others are gathering knowledge on their own, but they are not willing to share it with Carol, which it kind of sucks, but I understand why they're doing that, and we'll talk about that more later. Carol is a very abrasive individual. So we do get a confirmation that it is human body parts in this refrigeration unit, every body part of every dead human. And later on, we get an explanation from John Cena, Plurb, and he tells us why they're eating humans, because they need protein. There's not enough food. There's 7-point-something billion people on the planet, and there is no such thing as farming or husbandry or lab-grown food or anything of that sort. They only use what they can scavenge. So when Carol goes back to her house with the video footage that she recorded, she writes it on a package, and on the package she writes her name and her address. Now, you might not have thought anything of this at first, but later on, when we get to Manousos, we see that Carol may not be a person that is, I don't know how to say it, acceptable or easy to interface with like the other individuals are. Diabate is a very sociable individual. He's a socialite. He can get along with people very well. Carol is the opposite. And throughout this entire show, it felt like Carol, although she speaks English, she speaks an entirely different language than the other immune individuals, let alone the Pluribus, let alone the Hive. However, Manusos turns out to be, ironically, a person from another country, a country that Carol would have assumed he didn't speak English in, yet they speak each other's language. What Carol says in her videos, in her tapes that she recorded, speaks to Manusos, whereas it doesn't speak to any of the other immune individuals. But right before she leaves with that recording to go to Las Vegas to give it to Diabate, she returns to her house to vacuum up this HDP crystals, this HDP powder that has fallen on the ground. Now, I didn't know what to make of this. When I first saw it, I had this sense that the TV show wants us to view this as significant in some manner, whether it be significant for the plot, whether it be significant for the building up of our understanding of Carol's character. She's the kind of person who cleans up after herself. Maybe that's what it's telling us. I'm not sure what it meant, but if you have any thoughts as to why they chose to show Carol returning to vacuum up the HDP, let me know. So the intro starts after this, and I'm finally beginning to have a grasp as to what exactly is actually going on in this intro. This pulsating thing right here, it almost seems to align with what Manusos was hearing over the radio on his 8.613.0 radio channel. So little by little, we are beginning to understand this intro sequence. So let's move on to the gambling scene. We are in this scene for a little while as we see what Diabate has constructed for himself, this little simulation that he has constructed for himself. Now, first, before I talk about the themes that I believe Pluribus is giving to us here, I'll tell you what I put in my notes. I put, Diabate is so cringe, LOL, 3 exclamation points. This was the cringiest thing you could do if you lived with the Pluribus. He's turned the Plurb into slaves, essentially. They are slaves for his various fantasies that he'd like to live out. I also put, I hate bro so much, and Carol, please keep Zosha away from this guy. So in this scene, we're basically building up Diabate's character more, and we're also learning about the lengths that the Pluribus will go through to keep an immune individual sedated, I guess you would say. So they all play along with his fantasies whenever he wants to, as much as he wants to. He makes himself the main character of his own world. And I guess that's what a lot of people would do if they were living in this world with the Pluribus. But I just think it is incredibly cringe. And the difference between Diabate and Manusos is so strikingly clear in this episode. We have this character Manusos who, you know, he's Manusos. He's a real man. He has this iron will about him. He does not trust the Pluribus at all. He's okay with how things were. He's like Carol. And then you have Diabate, who's the opposite of Manusos, who's the opposite of Carol. He's not a bad guy. Diabate is not a bad individual. But he's an individual who is willing to play along with this fantasy, with this pluribus that has invaded the earth and taken control of most of humanity. He's willing to play along with it as long as he receives some pleasures and some rewards. Now, while watching this episode, there are a lot of different ways you can read into this show. The show doesn't have one singular message. It doesn't have one singular allegory. A lot of people say AI. I personally think that this is a show about authoritarianism. The pluribus are the individuals who have been, mind controlled or taken over by this authoritarian ideology that would map onto the real world. In the case of the immune individuals, these are people who live in an authoritarian regime who are aware and very conscious of the fact that what is happening is not right. They haven't fallen for it. They haven't bought into the ideology fully. But out of the 13 immune individuals, 11 of them are willing to play along just as long as they remain unscathed. And out of the 13 individuals, there are only 2, Carol and Manusos, who are willing not only to step up, but to fight back and to try to change the way things are. And they face Carol faces significant ostracization. She gets ostracized there, I'll say it that way, by both the ideologically captured individuals as well as the ideologically uncaptured yet complicit individuals. So we'll talk about that more later when we see how excluded Carol is, and as we take a look at my favorite scene so far of the entire show, which is Manusos listening to Carol's speech. So we have Carol arriving in Las Vegas, and I just want to note how pleasing on a sensory level the silence and the vacancy of everywhere is to me. I don't know if it's just me, but Pluribus is like visual ASMR in a way. She's going through the streets of Las Vegas. There's nobody there. You only see things and you only hear ambient noises. A lot of shows will try to fill the space with music, fill it with a bunch of sound effects, fill it up with an overflowing of ambient noise. But this show really allows us as the audience to breathe, to take it in, to be slow. I know some people had said that, the show was too slow, but to them I say, Vince is clearly cooking here. Like, the food is being salted and brined. It needs to soak in that seasoning before he puts it in the oven. This will be a great show. Just hold on and allow the world building to do its thing. So as Carol makes her way to the hotel where Diabate is, Kumba, the plurbs have scouts, I guess, watching her. They know she's coming and they evacuate the entire area. They leave Kumba alone by himself so that he can meet with Carol because they do not want to be around Carol still. So we get a cameo from John Cena here where they have the Pluribus prepared a video explaining why they're drinking this quote unquote milk, which is actually human derived protein. Essentially, the Pluribus cannot kill. They do not kill animals, meaning they can't farm them for food. They don't believe in holding animals against their will. so they can't do any husbandry or domestication of any undomesticated animals. They even cannot farm. They don't believe in plucking fruit from trees or harvesting vegetables or crops, because that too, to them, is a form of violence, a form of killing. Now, something that Pluribus does very, very good is exposition. Another show like this would have spent the entire episode explaining to you what HDP is, having Carol sort of try and figure everything out on her own, and then only throughout the entirety of the episode would we come to understand what HDP is, why the Pluribus drink it, their motivations, why they can't do other things. But in this show, I really like what the writers do, which is it's not a difficult concept. And this show isn't really about the Pluribus. I mean, it is, but the show at its core is about Carol. Potentially Manussos also, and Zosha. It is about their inner selves, their behaviors, their psychologies, and so on. We don't need to focus on these sci-fi concepts, even though it is a sci-fi show. Just tell us, like you did in the first episode, hey, this frequency came from outer space. It turned all these people into a hive mind. Just explain it on the TV, and then get back to the meat of the show, which is the difficult part of the writing, which not every writer can write well, which is the human aspect of it all. Carol's story. So I really like how exposition is done in the show. We don't need to spend unnecessary and precious time on learning why the Pluribus drink HDP. They can just tell us. There's nothing wrong with just telling us this through a tell and don't show, because so much of the show is show and not tell. It's okay to have a little bit of this tell and not show. So we continue on and we find out that the other immune individuals, well, not all of them except for Manussos, have been meeting twice a week over Zoom calls to talk, to catch up, to discuss any latest knowledge, to strategize, and they have been excluding Carol on purpose. This entire time, ever since that second episode, we've believed that the others are not contacting each other because, well, they're all just isolated and doing their own thing, just like Carol is, but that is not true. In this episode, we learn a very difficult fact, which is that everyone on planet Earth, except for one, is avoiding Carol. Everyone on Earth, except for one, is avoiding Carol. And the only one who is not avoiding Carol is Manussos, because he didn't know that she existed yet. How would you, when I saw this scene, I felt afraid for Carol, because we know at this point that Manussos is on the way, right? The flashback to Manussos was about 3 days earlier, so we know that he's already on the way. But I just felt for Carol here because, she got sent to conversion therapy, which is torture. Her wife died. She worked at a job that she hated. So just listen to this. She got sent to conversion therapy, which is literally torture. Then she worked as a writer, writing what she did not love to write. She hated her job. Then her wife died. She killed 11 million people by accident. 7 billion plus more people avoid her on purpose. 11 more individuals exclude you on purpose. You are alone, and you hurt Zosha to near death 2 times in a row. First off, If I was Carol, I might legitimately just kill myself at this point. She's a very strong woman. Second of all, like I said earlier, this show is not slow. I don't know what people are talking about. All of this stuff has happened since the first episode. It's only been a few days and a lot has taken place. The show is not slow at all. Your attention span is just cooked. Once again, Ray's face acting is amazing here. It's devastating. You're trying so hard after the world was suddenly taken over. Everything was uprooted. Your wife passed away. Animals tried eating your wife. Only to find out that the Pluribus, which is inhumanely positive and optimistic and happy, doesn't want anything to do with you. And the 11 other individuals also don't want anything to do with you as well. This is loneliness on a scale that is impossible for any of us alive now to comprehend. However, this is not just everyone else's fault. Carol is to blame here. As Diabate showed, it is easy to manipulate the Pluribus without upsetting them. They asked Kumba if he would like to donate his stem cells. He said, not at this time. It's that easy to manipulate them without pissing the entire Pluribus off or almost killing them. People are complicated, and Carol seems to have a way of simplifying everyone else except for herself. A person can be good in some ways, but bad in others. Now, Kumba is an example of this. Kumba gives into a lot of hedonism. Now, in most cultures, most modern cultures, hedonism is viewed as dangerous and bad or even immoral. We agree that it is not good for a human being to give into all of their passions whenever their passions come upon them. But Carol then sees that and extrapolates that Kumba must be an idiot, that he must not know anything. He must spend all of his time only partying, but this is not true. Kumba simply gathers information directly from the Pluribus themselves. He asks them, why do you drink milk? He asks them, how can you reverse this? He asks them this and that and that and that, and they get information and they share it amongst themselves. But Carol, because of her pride, because of her over-independence, because of the walls that she has put up, tries to do everything on her own, which is abrasive to both the Pluribus and to the other survivors. She assumes that everyone else is stupid, and although she speaks English like most of the other immune individuals, she doesn't quite speak their language. But as we'll see later on, there is one other person who speaks Carol's language and understands her, and that is Manusos. I felt very deeply moved by the exclusion of Carol and by her weeping in this bathroom. I've talked about it before on this channel, but I myself have been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome years ago. That condition is no longer named that. It is now known as autism level 1. I've struggled severely with social interactions, with the way that I speak to people, with my cadence, with my tone of voice, with my lack of social drive, and it is all amounted into me being perceived by other people as being socially abrasive, even though I don't want to be that way, or even though I don't perceive myself to be that way within myself. So to see Carol going through this, I felt deeply moved. And I just felt like praising the writers here for being able to convey this this social issue that Carol is facing that is not everyone else's fault, but legitimately has to do with her and the way that she approaches other people. Even though the way that she approaches other people is just a part of her personality. It is just a part of the way that Carol has been shaped by life. Are there any shippers watching this video? Earlier this week, Carolina Widra liked a Stersha fan art. You can see that on this video in the middle here. It's very small. You do have to zoom in here, but the image is Zosha saying, "We love you, Carol," with multiple speech bubbles saying that coming from Zosha's mouth, indicating the Pluribus, and Carol sticking up her middle finger back at Zosha. Carolina Widra, who plays Zosha, liked that on Instagram. In this episode, we also get the Abate saying that the Pluribus misses Carol, and then he explains further that Zosha specifically misses Carol. So add that to your tally for the, I don't know what I'm going to call it, the ship watch for Stersha. I believe that this relationship between them is extremely important. If you read Blood Song of Why Carol, you'll know why. I believe that whenever Zosha wakes up from her coma, she might not remember who Carol is. Or if that doesn't happen, when Zosha wakes up from whatever medical procedure she's undergoing now, in the future, at some point during Pluribus, it could be season 1, could be season 2, could be season 3, someone very important to Carol is not going to remember her name. They're not going to remember who Carol is. I feel very strong about that. That was a main feature of the Blood Song of Why Carol excerpt that we read. Just as a refresher for you all, in that excerpt, Lucasia, who is the main character of Carol's romantasy book, has a lover named Raban. Now, in a previous book, which we did not get to read, Raban apparently walked the plank. Lucasia made him do it, and she assumed that he's been dead. She has been, having sleepless nights, tossing and turning. She misses Raban so much, and then her entire crew on her ship falls deadly sick with a very fatal sickness. Lucasia travels to an island seeking for this mysterious healer that she's heard of who is able to heal this mysterious sickness. She finds the island, walks into a cave where she finds the mysterious healer, where she also finds Raban being healed. She assumed he was dead. It turns out he was not dead. He's just been in this cave being healed by this lady. Unfortunately, as the woman is healing him and Raban is getting healed, Raban recognizes the jacket that Lucasia, the main character, is wearing as being one of his own, but he does not recognize Lucasia herself. Now, when we read through that book, we mapped Lucasia onto Carol, and we mapped Zosha onto either we mapped Raban onto either Zosha or Helen. Another interesting thing about Zosha specifically is that she appears to have a level of individuality that other members of the Pluribus do not seem to have. We saw it in episode 2. She looks back on the plane before getting on it. She looks back towards Carol. We saw in later episodes, she seems to always be looking at Carol. And then again, we see it in this episode where Kumba specifically mentions that Zosha specifically, that individual within the hive mind, misses Carol. So I'm really just confused as to why it seems that Zosha seems to have a higher degree of individuality, whether or not it's just a form of manipulation or whether or not it is legitimate, I still don't know, but I'll keep my eye on that. So we have a very wonderful use of this time code here, showing us go from 12 days back to 9 days. So this is 3 days earlier. We're heading back to the scene that we saw a few episodes ago with Manousos, but we're actually going to see what it is that he's doing here. So he's going through each of the radio stations, and he goes back to this station 8.613.0. And on this station, he hears some sort of a repeating sound signature. Now, in the first episode, we know that this distant, pulsating message was being sent to Earth that turned out to be RNA, that turned out to be the virus that infected every human being on Earth except for 13. I believe that's exactly what Manousos is hearing now. He's able to pick up on it from his radio for some reason. I think that is significant. I personally have a theory that the Pluribus mind control only works while that whatever it is from out of space is being sent to Earth continuously. That pulsating message, that repeating message is being sent to Earth. I think it only works if that continues to keep playing, and that is what Manousos is picking up on here. So I'll let you guys listen to that. I think it's not a mistake that we can continue to hear that noise in the background as Manousos' mother comes to drop food off to him once again. I don't think that's a mistake at all. The show wants us to associate that noise with the Pluribus. We don't have much dialogue, as is typical for the show as a whole, but even more standard for scenes with Manousos. We don't have as much dialogue, but once again, I don't know why. I just love that. I love the use of sound. The sound, like I said, it's like ASMR, but in a television show form. One of my favorite shows when I was a kid was Max and Ruby and Tom and Jerry, and these are shows where the characters don't speak. They don't speak English. They just make sounds. And I found them very relaxing, very calming as a kid. And I always understood what was going on anyway. In this day and age where we have our senses being overloaded with, shorts and TikTok and edits and all these things over social media, it's just so nice to have a show that just lets the crafters craft and, lets the sound engineers do their thing and lets the actors do their thing, and everyone, the cinematography, everyone gets a chance for their contribution to the show to breathe and to just take the spotlight. Is very pleasing for me. But like I said in the beginning, this is my favorite scene in the entire show so far. Carol is a hero. She is a hero. I know for the past couple episodes, she's kind of looked very, very, I don't know. She looked like a lost cause. Everything just seemed hopeless. But then we meet Manousos, who's just like her, who's, and in the episode when Zosha was in the hospital and Carol gave her that truth serum, I said that I was picking up on some biblical inspiration within the way that the story was being told. And I likened it to Adam and Eve, with Carol being sort of like a Eve figure / Satan figure, where she is introducing or trying to introduce unsanctioned or forbidden behaviors or forbidden thoughts to this Pluribus who supposedly live in a paradise of human psychology. Manousos here, Carol didn't pay much attention to him at first. Most likely, she assumed he's not an English speaker. Another one of Carol's faults, she treats people from other parts of the world as being less capable than herself by default. But I just really liked the heroic vibe we got here. They did that very well. Like I said, this episode really comes off as a story about authoritarianism. It seems like Carol is leading some sort of a revolution, and Manousos is going to become a devout follower. Of course, he's not going to actually become a follower, but, analogy's sake, like a follower to Carol. The 13 immune individuals are people who haven't fully bought into the authoritarian ideology, if we're going along with that analogy. But 11 of them, like I said earlier, have decided to toe the line. They've decided to pretend. And just 2 of them have decided that they will not pretend and that they will try and change things and make it better.
That they didn't tell me. But they so resisted telling me that everybody suddenly burst into tears. Worldwide, apparently. Which I know upset at least one of you.
So, again, we see the reframing. When Carol recorded this video and we were watching her, it was kind of like we felt what Carol was feeling. We saw her video through her eyes. We felt like it was cringy. We felt like it wouldn't do anything, like it wouldn't matter, like it was weird, like it was lame. But now we see Carol through Manousos' eyes. We see that he individually felt moved by what Carol was saying. Not in the way that the Pluribus Hive says they were moved by the White Caro series, but in his own unique way, he felt moved and touched by what Carol was saying. And I'm sure that good luck and Godspeed that Carol dropped at the end of the video felt great to him as well. And so I loved this scene so much. I loved how Manousos takes initiative and he decides he's going to head over to where Carol is. And I'm very happy that this was a flashback so that we don't have to wait the full amount of time for him to get to Carol in the next episodes. We already start with him already traveling toward her. This situation must be incredibly terrifying for Manousos. He has presumably been on his own, completely isolated since the initial joining event, and now he's taking his first steps out because of Carol. Carol has the unique ability to draw these other individuals who are not like the other 11 out of their hiding places and put them together to see if they can figure something out. So I'm very excited to see how the 2 of them get along. I think the other 11 think that they've quarantined Carol off, that they're done with her. She's never going to figure it out. She's never going to be able to do anything alone until they find Manousos, who is just as analytical, if not more, than Carol. And he also speaks English, so that's a plus. In my notes here, I just had 2 more things. Manousos is, I don't know, I think I'm falling for him. He was just so manly and so cool in this episode. And it also gave me Last of Us vibes, the way he was scavenging through these houses, through these apartments. And also he gave me a little bit of, he gave me a little bit of Ellie vibes from The Last of Us. So congrats to Ray for her nomination for a Golden Globe. I hope she wins. It's a tough year this time around. A lot of competition amongst the best actress categories in every award show this year. But here's hoping that either Ray Seahorn or Brett Lauer wins that award. Let me know what you guys think of episode 6, HDP. It is my favorite episode because of Manusos, because of this last ending scene. I really get a sense of an upward swelling and an acceleration of the plot here, that things are going to start to turn around in a way that it hasn't been for the first 5 episodes. I'm also hoping to see Zosha here. I'm very interested to see how her relationship with Carol continues to develop over the season. Everyone who is involved in the show seems to be very, very in favor of the Stersha relationship here. So I want to see why they think that, why it's so compelling for them, and why they chose to add it to the show. So thanks, guys.